so this is Saturday, and it's time for True Crime Tales with Christiana. This is a script. I use it because I have short-term memory loss. This is basically what I read off of. Also, I did not intend to skip last week. I did have a bunch of segments already typed up, but my laptop on Friday decided that it was going to power wash itself and deleted everything I had typed and saved up to that point. So we're back to printing them out, and I basically had to start over. So here we go. John William Agrue was an American serial killer who murdered at least 2 women in Longmont, Colorado from June to July of 1982, after having served 14 years in prison for the murder of a sister-in-law in Illinois. He was arrested after attempting to kidnap a 3rd victim, but was not initially linked to the murders, and thus he was only convicted of kidnapping and served 6 years in prison. He lived in freedom until his death in June of 2009, with the murders only being linked to him via DNA evidence in the early 2010s. On July 1st of 1966, an 18-year-old Agrue met with his 15-year-old sister-in-law, Susan Marino, in downtown Joliet, Illinois, and asked her to accompany him to the nearby Hamel Woods Forest Preserve. When they arrived there, he started making romantic advances toward her, only to be promptly rejected. Angered, Agrue pulled out a small knife and stabbed her approximately a dozen times, killing Marino in the process. Later that day, he returned to his home and admitted the murder to his wife, who initially did not believe his claims. To prove his guilt, he drove her to the crime scene and showcased where he had left Marino's purse and shoes. After this, Agrue's wife began urging him to surrender himself to the authorities. He instead went to a local church and confessed to the priest, who promptly contacted the authorities. Agrue was taken into custody 2 days later, and during subsequent interviews, he admitted that he had killed Marino because she opposed his advances towards her. Due to his confession and overwhelming evidence implicating him in the crime, Agrue was swiftly convicted, sentenced to a 20 to 50-year prison term, and transferred to the Joliet Correctional Center. In December of 1975, Agrue was transferred to the University of Illinois Hospital in Chicago, where he was to undergo surgery to donate his kidney to his sister Kathleen. For this occasion, about 50 prison employees volunteered to supervise him on their days off, as there were fears that he might use the opportunity to escape. The operation was delayed until May 4th, and after its success, he was ordered to remain there until he could fully recuperate. On May 11th, Agrue was reported missing from the hospital by one of the security guards. Earlier that day, he had snuck out of a bathroom window and stolen a car, which he abandoned after reaching state lines. From there, he used 2 fake IDs, hitchhiked, and stole other cars during his travels through the various states, with his supposed destination being California. About a week later, however, he was captured in Central City, Nebraska, after somebody reported that their car had been stolen. Agrue offered no resistance during the arrest and was later extradited back to Illinois to serve the remainder of his sentence. In January of 1982, Agrue was paroled and decided to move in with relatives in Colorado. He initially lived in Boulder before moving to Longmont. In later June 1982, he encountered 20-year-old Susan Becker somewhere in the vicinity of Boulder and proceeded to stab her 13 times in the chest, clavicle, and neck. So basically all like up here. After killing her, he dumped the body in the Boulder Canyon, where it was found by fishermen on July 1st. Whilst he was considered a suspect in her death, Agrue was not thoroughly investigated at the time. It was eventually written off by investigators. For me, here's what aggravates me about this whole thing. He was already in prison. 6 years. 6 years for kidnapping. What kind of sentence is that? Like, he was already in prison, and if you had just kept him there, none of this shit would have continued happening. Also, by the way, sorry the back is a mess. It's been a week. But anyway, like, you had time to stop him if you had just kept him in prison. Like, most people who kidnap small children or teenagers or underage minors, whatever you want to say or however you want to phrase it, are probably going to do it again. Let's just be real. And he admitted that he tried to have sex with this minor child, and you still only gave him 6 years. That's what I don't understand. Like, you knew what kind of person he was, and you let him out of prison so he could do it again. A week after the discovery of Becker's body, Agrue stabbed to death his neighbor, 94-year-old retired librarian Orma B. Smith, at her apartment in Longmont. He later discarded her body in the nearby Big Elk Creek Meadows, where it was found on the following day. 6 days after that, Agrue attempted to abduct a woman at knife point on the campus of University of Colorado Boulder, but was apprehended on the spot and lodged in the local prison. At this time, he was publicly identified as a suspect in the murder of Smith, but prosecutors could not bring charges due to a lack of concrete evidence linking him to the crime. He was her neighbor. I don't know how much more concrete evidence. I mean, I guess maybe DNA, but like to me, that's pretty solid, like concrete evidence to me. He was her neighbor. He had already been convicted of a violent crime, kidnapping. Just saying. In March 1983, Agrue was convicted of the attempted abduction and given a prison sentence, but he was immediately returned to Illinois for parole violation. He remained behind bars until 1989 when he was paroled yet again. And to give you an idea, I just turned 37 on the 9th of April. I was born in 1988. So this was a year after I was born. Almost to the day. Just saying. This time, he decided to remain in Joliet, where he lived for the remainder of his life. Because he didn't have to actually go to prison for the murders that he committed, which I just mind-blowing for me. Since his last release from prison, Agrue has not been linked to any violent crimes, although one of his neighbors reported that he had bragged about the murders in private and had exhibited other disturbing behavior. Because of this, she sought to have a restraining order issued against him, which was not granted because Agrue had not harmed her personally. But he murdered his other neighbor. Bruh, I would want a protection order too. Like, and the fact that he openly admitted this to said neighbor, like, casually was like, yeah, I did all those murders that you heard about. That was me. And you want to say that she doesn't need a protection order when you actively think that this man is responsible for 4 murders, whatever. But you don't need protection, it's fine. He's not a bad guy, we just think he did some really bad things. But you're fine, you're fine. On June 29, 2009, Agrue was found at his home in Joliet from what an autopsy determined to be an accidental overdoses of prescription medication. Whilst inspecting his home, relatives found women's purses and jewelry in his home, as well as newspaper clippings about the attempted abduction and the murders of Becker and Smith. So he wasn't even able to be, like, convicted when they did find proof that he did it because he'd already died. So this man essentially... 2009, I know to a lot of people seems like a really long time ago, but it really wasn't that long ago. And in comparison to when he committed the murders, that is a long and healthy life for somebody. Well, maybe not healthy, I don't know, he was on drugs, but it's still a pretty long life for someone, and you're just like... So you got to live your life out, but the people that you murdered didn't. One of those girls is forever 15. Like, that's sad. Like, I hate these stories where it feels like they never really got justice for anyone that was murdered or hurt by this felon, essentially. Because, like, he still got to live out his life. He didn't have to live in prison. He didn't get 3 square meals a day. They didn't, is what I meant. They don't get 3 square meals a day. You know, like, they're dead. They're dead because of this man. And he did no time, essentially, for any of these murders. And if I was their family now, I would be so pissed off because, like, how do you just, like, be like, no biggie, we think he did it, but we can't prove it, so he's just gonna, like, chill, okay? After his death, investigators from a cold case unit began testing his DNA to determine whether he was truly responsible for the murder of Smith decades prior. Almost a year later, his DNA was successfully matched that of the Smith crime scene. This is the 94-year-old librarian, which fortunately for her, she did live out most of her life, but it's still sad how she died. Like, that's not... Nobody deserves to die like that. with authorities announcing that they had officially solved the case. It only took you like 20 years. At the time, he was still considered a suspect in Becker's murder as well, but due to the lack of usable DNA in that case, they had to resort to other means of investigation to solve it. In May 2013, authorities announced that due to the similarity to Agrue's other known murders and other evidence that placed him near the crime scene, he was considered the sole and most likely suspect in Becker's murder. Because of this, Agrue was posthumously labeled a serial killer, with state police and the FBI announcing that they would be reviewing other cold cases to determine whether he's responsible for any further violent crimes. As of January of this year, 2025, no other cases have been linked to Agrue. Now, that's not to say that he didn't do them, because, I mean, let's be real, like, you know, like, we're still finding out about victims that Ted Bundy had, or probably had. And the same with John Wayne Gacy, the same with Jeffrey Dahmer. You know, you could find out another 30 years from now that this guy who's been dead for 100 years is, you know, for sure the murderer. You know, I mean, he obviously hasn't been dead 100 years, but you know what I mean. And it's just, I don't know, like, I just cannot. He served 14 years for the murder of his sister-in-law. He attempted to kidnap a third victim and served 6 years in prison. 20 years in prison, and they were all like, you know what, though, I feel like he's, like, a really good guy deep down, so, like, we're not gonna, like, keep him in prison because, like, you know, he should have a chance to live out his life. Well, you know what? Susan didn't get a chance to live out her life. She's forever 15, 6 feet under, with her family grieving. Every holiday, every birthday, every... just like... So, like, how can you just sit there and be like, yeah, well, we know you served 20 years in prison, but, like, we don't want to keep you long-term because, like, we think you're basically a good guy, so just don't go out there and do it again. But then you go out there and do it again, and they still put you in prison for less than your life sentence. And that's the part that gets me. Like, if they've already done it once, what's to say they wouldn't do it again? And why would you not think that way? I think we think more that way now than we did back then because, you know, like, back then... crime was kind of not talked about a lot, and serial killers were not a big thing back then, which I don't understand, because in the 70s, you had 4 active major serial killers. Actually, 5, that I can think of off the top of my head. And that would be John Wayne Gacy, Jeffrey Dahmer, Ted Bundy, BTK, Dennis Rader, and the Zodiac Killer, who I'm still not sure if they've actually identified who that is, or if they just think they have a theory on who that might be. But either way, they had 5 active serial killers in the 70s, and you're trying to tell me, well, crime wasn't really a thing in the 80s. It wasn't that bad. Ma'am. Or sir. You had 5 active serial killers in the 70s. And actually, I also think that in, like, the 70s and 80s, Richard Ramirez was active too, wasn't he? So that makes 6. That makes 6. Crime is a thing. Crime has always been a thing. I mean, look at 1800s where Jack the Ripper was running around gutting women. Like, you know, they had the opportunity to prevent these other murders from happening by keeping him in prison when he was convicted of murdering his sister-in-law. That's all I have to say about this. Anyway, let me know what you guys think. Let me know if there's somebody you want a topic on. Whatever. Let me know if this mic works or not. As always, make good choices. Be cautiously kind to others. And don't do anything I wouldn't do. Bye.